Rodeo, the kid journalist covering Hollywood hits, movies and music and more. Welcome to the Drive-Thru, interviews and reviews. You'll be entertained for sure. So stay for a while, 1950 style. Forget your blues with the cruise at Rodeo's Drive-Thru Hollywood News. Ooh, yeah.
Hello, welcome to Rodeo's Drive-Thru Hollywood News. I'm your host, Rodeo Marie Hansen. Joining me today is comic, author, TV, and podcast host Dennis Miller. Dennis is a Saturday Night Live alum and Emmy and Writers Guild of America award winner. Dennis, you worked in many mediums, stand-up, television, film, and podcasting. When did you first realize that you were funny and wanted to pursue a career in comedy?
By the way, thank you for having me, Rodeo. When I was young, I remember seeing a stand-up comedian in quite frankly, a bar where I lived in Pittsburgh. And I remember thinking, well, there's a quirky job I might try. So I would say it was right when I was out of college, maybe a couple years after that. And comedy wasn't as, an across-the-board job as it is now. There are many comedians, and at the time it seemed like an odd try, a foray, so I tried it back then. So what am I, 65 now? That must be 40 years ago, close to.
That's great. You hosted Saturday Night Live's Weekend Update for a few years from the late 1980s to the early 90s. How did you land the gig, and how is SNL and politics different today than when you were on the show?
Well, listen, back then we were, our job description was to make fun of whoever was in power. And at that time it was Reagan. I don't know that today I don't watch the show as much, but it does seem to me that they lean a little more to the left than when I was on there. I got the job just by auditioning in Los Angeles at the Comedy Store. And Al Franken, believe it or not, the man who went on to be the senator, was the producer that year, and he asked me to come perform in front of Lauren in New York, maybe a month later, and I did that, and it was a pretty long process, but that's how I got the gig.
Nice. You have acted in several films. One that I found interesting is 1995's The Net. Although the internet is a part of the film's plot, what appears in the net isn't quite the cyber world we have today. While you were filming The Net, did you realize the significance of what the internet would go on to become just a few years after the film's release?
Quite frankly, I didn't. I just thought it seemed like a fun part, and I admired Sandra. And indeed, she turned out to be a great mate. She was very funny and a good hang, great to act with. But at the time, I remember the internet, obviously, as I look back, I think it might have been the first big Hollywood feature that involved the internet. And no, nobody saw what would come of it. But I feel proud that I might have been there at the beginning of the films based on the internet. And obviously, I feel proud that I got to work with Sandra Bullock, who was a delight.
That's fantastic. You're the author of several books that have been on the New York Times list of bestsellers. From titles like The Rants to The Rant Zone, what motivates you to write, and do you approach the topics for your books in the same way as your stand-up comedy or podcast?
Well, to be honest, the rant books were simply an accumulation of rants that I did on my HBO show. I had a HBO show for around 215 episodes, and we would accumulate the rants and book them and put them in book form, and then I would augment them with another 5 or 10 that I wrote specifically for the book. So when you say, is it the same approach? Very same approach. It seems like my mind thinks in brief bursts as opposed to long book-length projects. So it was a sort of an accumulation of rants. So very similar approach.
Mm-hmm. You hosted the MTV Video Music Awards. What is your opinion on the importance of music education and the arts in public school?
Let me see. That's a wide reach there. I think great art will out, and I don't know that it always needs subsidized, but I am for subsidizing young people. As art gets older, I want artists to find their way to their audience as opposed to them being subsidized. But I do think art education for kids is a noble subsidizing. The MTV Awards I did 2 years in a row, and I look back on it now, and it's funny to me. I was just talking to my son about it this afternoon. We were at a baseball game, and I said, I forget how MTV came up, but I said, God, it seems like a lifetime ago that I hosted those awards, and indeed it was. I remember that they once had me hooked up with the Soviet space station to give them an MTV award, and the translator's microphone wouldn't work. So I remember my big memory of the MTV Awards is being on TV live, talking to Russian guys who only spoke Russian, giving them an MTV award while they were on the space station, not understanding what they're saying, and looking down into the first row, and Eddie Van Halen just laughing so hard at me that I was in that predicament. So that's my big memory. But I had fun, but it does seem like a lifetime ago.
That's great. You have won many awards for writing, from the Writers Guild of America. To you, what is the most important ingredient to writing a joke that everyone will laugh at?
An unexpected turn. And I don't know that that's what's in favor now in the culture. It seems like a lot of people get in trouble for their humor. But I do think leading people one way with your premise, and then an unexpected, sometimes sardonic, sometimes rough. Comedy can be mean. Sometimes always unexpected. I think that's the big thing in comedy. It's almost like a magician's trick at some point. You have to take an odd left somewhere in the joke to evoke a reaction. Therefore, I'm less judgmental of comedians who are trying. Sometimes they will misstep, but at least they're trying.
Mm-hmm. When were you first starting out in the business? What was the biggest obstacle you encountered? And what advice would you give to a young person who is inspired by your success and dreams of growing up to become a comedian?
Well, the big thing was the fear of getting on stage. As any list will tell you, it's one of the big fears. But I was writing jokes, and I was selling them to people, and then I would see them do well with the joke. And I remember thinking, I have to force myself through this fear to become the conduit for my material. What I would advise young people is, while it might appear frightening from the outside to step in front of people, it is not anywhere, obviously, near life and death situation. And I would go up there in the full knowledge that even if you do poorly at any given time, if you keep doing poorly, you'll get better at it, and not to worry about the moment as much, but see the longer view.
That's fantastic. You come from Pittsburgh. Recently, you were back in your home state when you brought your Adorable Deplorable show with Mark Steyn to Reading, PA. What was the best part of your trip to Reading? And for those who haven't had the opportunity to see the show yet, what can they expect?
Well, the best part was I had never worked with Mark before. We're friends, but we had never been on stage together, and we dovetailed nicely. It was a good give and take, and I think the crowd really enjoyed it. The show is, I would tell people who are possibly want to come, that it's not preachy, it's not sour, it's not about politics as much as it's funny. It's a funny look at the world we live in, so they should know when they come there that night, it's not going to be a dissertation on things, it's going to be a laugh your butt off thing.
That seems great. What does Dennis Miller find funny, and what makes him laugh?
A comedian named Brian Regan makes me laugh. Sebastian Maniscalco makes me laugh. And just the incongruities of a world where everybody thinks we've figured things out, but really, like much of mankind throughout the ages, we're stumbling around in the dark, and occasionally we kick our shins on a desk or a chair. So that makes me laugh. Like anybody, I guess, the throughout the years, just when people think they have it all figured out and they don't, there's a humor to that.
Nice. What is your favorite go-to snack food?
Let me see. I like a queso potato chip by Ruffles. That's my favorite snack food.
Cool. If you
And I have time for one more, Rodeo, before I have to move on. What's your best pitch here, kiddo?
If you weren't doing comedy, what do you think you would be doing for a living?
I would like to be one of those people who was a travel writer who goes around the world and sees things. And like there's a writer named Paul Theroux who I really admire. Just I think seeing the world and then writing about it would be bliss.
Nice. Thank you very much to my very special guest, Dennis Miller. Until next time, that's a wrap. Dennis Miller is performing with Mark Steyn at the FM Kirby Center on Saturday, March 2nd, as part of their Adorable Deplorable Tour. For tickets to the show or other dates to go see Dennis Miller live, go to www.ticketmaster.com.